Do you know about the collapse of England's cities in 2024? It started in the shadows beneath London, then spread faster than anyone could imagine, turning familiar places into nightmarish ruins. Birmingham fell first, then Manchester, and soon the entire country was overrun. But what happened in those early days, when survival was still possible and the infected were just beginning to rise? A 28-year-old woman with short auburn hair and a weathered blue jacket had made it out of the tunnels, barely. But the city above wasn't any safer. The virus had spread faster than anyone could have anticipated. Within hours of the outbreak in the London Underground, reports of infections began flooding in from all over the city. As a 28-year-old woman with short auburn hair and a weathered blue jacket staggered through the empty streets of London, she saw the chaos firsthand. Entire neighborhoods had been abandoned, their windows shattered and streets littered with debris. The woman joined a small group of survivors who had taken refuge in an old office building. There were 8 of them, a mix of civilians and off-duty emergency responders. They had food, weapons, and a plan. If they could hold out long enough, maybe help would come. But as the days dragged on, hope began to fade. It wasn't just London anymore. Birmingham was the first city to fall after London. The infection spread through the underground rail system, catching the entire city by surprise. People panicked, rushing to the surface in an attempt to escape, but the infection had already made it topside. By the end of the week, the infection had spread to nearly every major city in the UK. The virus wasn't just confined to the underground anymore. It had evolved, becoming airborne in confined spaces like train stations and public buildings. Those who hadn't been bitten were now falling sick just by being near the infected. The survivors listened to the radio for updates, but the news only grew worse. Quarantine zones had failed. The military was being overrun. The infection had crossed the Channel Tunnel, and reports of outbreaks were coming in from Paris and beyond. The world was falling apart, and there was no stopping it. That night, the survivors heard something strange, a sound that had been missing from the city streets for days. Helicopters. They rushed to the rooftop, their hope reignited at the sight of military helicopters flying overhead. Were they being rescued? But as the helicopters drew closer, the survivors' hearts sank. These weren't rescue teams. They were spraying something into the air, a mist that hung over the streets like a thick fog. A 28-year-old woman with short auburn hair and a blue jacket turned, but before she could take a step, the air filled with the sound of growls. The infected were coming.